Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, February 27th, 2019 Placer County Transportation Planning Agency meeting. We will begin with a flag salute. Please join me in saluting our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If the clerk would be kind enough to call the roll.
Allard.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Broadway.
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Holmes.
Here.
Joyner. Mackey.
Here.
Euler.
All right. Okay, now we'll move to item C, which is closed session in conference room A, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation of subdivision of government code section 54956-9.
Mr. Chair, we have nothing under this item today.
Pardon?
We have nothing under this item today.
Oh, okay, good. Well, we'll table that. Thanks for letting me know. We'll now move to item D, approval of action minutes, January 23rd, 2019. Any issues, changes?
Move approval.
It's moved and seconded to approve the minutes of January 23rd, 2019. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Agenda review, anything on the agenda that needs to be changed or added or taken away?
No, sir.
Seeing none, we'll move to public comment. This is a time for anyone in the audience who wishes to address this agency on any item that's not on our agenda. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move to item G, our consent calendar. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen may request an item to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Anyone wishes anything from the consent to be removed for discussion? Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we'll ask approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We'll now move to item H, unmet transit needs report and findings fiscal year 2019-20.
Good morning, board. I have this item. So we're going to be taking the unmet transit needs report from the past year, approving unmet transit needs for this year. So we have some new faces on our board and my face among them on staff. So I'm going to start from the very beginning. One of PCTPA's responsibilities is to administer Transportation Development Act funds. So this is a state law that creates two funds to fund public transportation: the State Transit Assistance, which is STA, and the Local Transportation Fund, which is LTF. These come from a statewide sales tax and a statewide diesel tax. They go to the state level, get separated into these two funds. They come back through the RTPAs, of which PCTPA is one, and then we pass these funds through to the cities and the county and the operators for transit. So today we're just going to be talking about unmet transit needs, which just deals with LTF, so we're going to table STA for today. Last year, PCTPA and its agencies got just over $22 million in LTF funds. So these get separated according to population. And so you can see that it's representative of how the populations in our various cities and the county separate. And then PCTPA takes just under $900,000 off this funds to do transportation planning efforts. So LTF's priority is to be spent on public transit, things like buses, light rail, etc. However, the law states that in counties where the urban population is less than 500,000, these transit funds can be used to fund streets and roads projects, given that there are, quote, no unmet transit needs. So because we meet that threshold, we're a smaller county and a rural county, many of our jurisdictions choose to use some of this funds to fund streets and roads types projects. This chart shows how the percent of this LTF spent on transit has changed over time. You can see that overall the trend is a decrease in spending of LTF for transit-related projects. I'll note that this is a combination of a lot of things, including funding sources from other funds. So there are many other opportunities where the funding is not as flexible, and that our agencies have overall provided the same amount of transit service measured in annual miles of transit service, and actually it's increasing. So this decrease in LTF spent on transit isn't necessarily an indicator of a decrease in transit service. And that overall there's been a decrease in transit ridership. That's a national trend. So that brings us to this unmet transit needs process. Essentially what we're doing is we're asking the public if they have any unmet transit needs, and then we're comparing those against the adopted definition that the PCTPA Board of Directors last adopted in 2014. What we're doing is asking two questions. First, is the thing they're requesting unmet, and is it reasonable to meet? Essentially, do we already provide this transit service, and if we did provide it, could we afford to, does it make sense, etc. So in October of last year, PCTPA did lots of outreach, including workshops in Lincoln, Auburn, and Tahoe City. We had a public hearing here at this board meeting in October, did a lot of emails, social media, online surveys, and then good old-fashioned flyers, contacting agency partners, and making phone calls, people calling me. We got a total of 244 people who responded to this outreach. Of those, there are 170 comments in the report. The remainder are folks who just wanted to chat about transit, maybe didn't have an actual request or wanted to fill out the survey, but didn't put anything positive or negative about transit, so I left them out of the report. So this process started in October with that outreach, then PCTPA staff does analysis through November, produced a draft report in December, which was circulated to city and county staff, and then we had a meeting of our Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, which includes transit riders and social service operators who have a long-standing relationship with PCTPA, and we discussed the findings in the draft report. Then we brought it to our Transportation Advisory Committee and our TAC and in February, and both the SS TAC and the TAC concurred with staff recommendations, which I'll get to, which brings us to board adoption. That's today. So there's a lot of comments, but I think I can summarize them in 4 key trends for you guys. First is that, like in most years, there was a request for service that already exists. A lot of people are saying, I live here and I want to take the bus here, and I respond to them, there is a bus that goes there, you pick it up here, goes every half hour, that's how you get there. So this reflects a need for continued community education and public outreach around the transit service that we do already have, so people can understand how to use it. The second is a large number of requests for service and expanded service in the newly developed areas, particularly in West Roseville and parts of Rockland. The cities are both aware of this new development and how it's affecting the need for maybe larger fixed transit service, and they're continuing to monitor that need as those areas continue to build out. The third trend is a lot of comments about commuter service. Both Placer County and Roseville operate really successful commuter services. And so we had a lot of folks saying either I really like this commuter service or I want more buses to come to this location or that location. So this is definitely something that we're going to be looking into as PCTPA staff as part of our upcoming corridor plan with Sacramento. And the fourth trend is a request for rural lifeline service. This is, again, something that we get in most years. Places like Alta, Sheridan, Forest Hill looking for new or more frequent service to their next closest city. And PCTPA continues to monitor these. Currently, we don't think there's enough ridership to support the service for it to meet the need, but we're definitely keeping an eye. For the first time in a number of years, this report includes a recommended finding that there are unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet. Specifically, there's one. It's comment number 156. It's long, but in summary, there are 2 components to this comment. There's a person who wants to go from Lincoln to Sierra College, which is in Rockland, and they need this service to be for someone who is physically unable to use standard fixed route bus. A little background, there is a standard fixed route bus that Placer County Transit operates, Bus 20, the Lincoln Sierra College bus, and it runs between Lincoln and through the Galleria to Sierra College. You can see that in orange on the map. And then there are 2 dial-a-ride areas, both of which are operated by Placer County Transit. There's the Lincoln dial-a-ride area, the whole extensive Lincoln, and then there's the Rockland/Loomis dial-a-ride area, which is the extent of those 2 incorporated areas. So this is a leftover from when Lincoln Transit got absorbed into Placer County Transit a few years ago. So even though these 2 dial-a-ride areas are both operated by Placer County Transit and the same buses, essentially, residents can't cross between these 2 areas. Now, the short-range transit plan, which we just passed last year, recommends combining these 2 areas. So this request for someone to have such a service for a person who's physically unable to ride transit is consistent with the short-range transit plan. So it's not met by our existing transit system. You can't currently take such a ride between Lincoln and Rockland. It would meet fare box requirements. Dial-a-ride doesn't have very strict fare box requirements. And in general, this because the 2 dial-a-ride areas are already operated by the same service, just a matter of figuring out a scheduling system to go between the 2. It's not anticipated to be a significant increase in cost. Therefore, the cost would also not exceed the amount of funding that the two cities have to pay for this. And there's community support. There's longstanding, especially from our social service operators, been a conversation about better transit connections between our cities for dial-a-ride. And it's consistent, as I said, with the short-range transit plan and the regional transportation plan. Therefore, PCTPA staff recommendation is that this request is an unmet transit need that is also reasonable to meet. So PCTPA started meeting with Placer County, Rockland, Lincoln, and Loomis to discuss this issue and figure out a solution. And essentially the solution, which is detailed in the resolution and also in the report, is twofold. The first part is to actually meet the unmet need. So that's specifically for a person looking to go who's physically unable to do fixed route bus to go between Lincoln and Rockland. And the two cities and the town and the county are going to work together to come up with a pilot program over the next year to figure out a way to allow such a ride to happen on dial-a-ride. Then there's the larger short-range transit plan recommendation, which is to totally combine those two dial-a-ride areas for the general public. So not just for people who are unable to ride fixed route, but for everybody. That's not directly a response to the unmet need. So the PCTPA and the cities, the town, and the county are going to keep working together to try to figure out whether that's feasible or makes sense for the cities to do in the future. So those are the two things that are going on in terms of solving this problem. So in summary, the PCTPA staff recommendation, which is concurred by the SSTAC and the TAC, is that there are unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, specifically service between Lincoln and Rockland for someone who's physically unable to use the Placer County Transit. Lincoln Sierra College route is an unmet transit need that's reasonable to meet for 1920, and that the unmet transit needs report for fiscal year 2019-2020 is accepted and complete. So in terms of next step, I recommend that the board take public comment on this report, if there is any, and then vote on the resolution to approve it. And then if it's approved, PCTPA staff will submit this report to Caltrans, and we'll start the process all over again in October. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Any questions for, yeah.
Yeah, do we have a sense for how long it's going to take for a actual solution to be in place for those who require the service?
It's not anticipated to take very long. We're hoping that it will be done sometime in the next year. It's just a matter of timing it correctly so that there's not any shortages. Essentially, if someone's taking this long dial-a-ride ride between Lincoln and Sierra College, that's a dial-a-ride bus that could potentially create a shortage in other areas. So it's just a matter of getting the strategy correct and the two cities working together to find a way to fund the mechanism. But it's not very complicated, so we're hopeful that it will be implemented very soon.
Okay, and you'll update us as we move forward with that. And then the 24-month period for monitoring, is it after that period of time that we're going to look at the potential for combining the two areas, or could that occur prior to the 24 months of monitoring?
The cities and the county are still working on a strategy in terms of, the real issue is that because you can't currently take this ride, we don't have a good sense about how much demand there would be for such a ride. So I could imagine different scenarios where if there's suddenly a lot of demand for this service, we might get started on the combination earlier, or if it's less demand, we might get started later. But I'll make sure to keep the board updated as this process continues. And the city and the county are aware of this.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments for Ms. Hanley? Anyone in the audience wish to address the board on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board.
Second, did you open the public hearing? Is that what that was? Do we not have to have a formal public hearing on this?
I didn't see that, but if just, okay, I'll open a public hearing. Anyone wish to address the board on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Euler. Now. Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move this item, unmet transit needs report and findings for fiscal year 2019-2020, adopt resolution 19-01, making the following findings as in the staff report. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion is passed. Thank you. We'll now move to item I, preliminary draft fiscal year 2019-20 overall work program and budget.
Good morning, Chair Holmes, members of the board. I'm going to be presenting this item. This is the preliminary draft work program for next fiscal year, and it's due to Caltrans by March 1st of each year. This work program gives you an overview of staff activities and the budget plan for next year. And this is a preliminary draft for release for review, and then will be brought back to the board in May for adoption. Next fiscal year, we plan to focus on continuing project implementation for the Highway 65 Phase 1 design, for the I-80 auxiliary lanes design, and also the Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure environmental end design. We'll also be continuing efforts to complete the 2020 Regional Transportation Plan by the end of 2019. And of course, we're continuing coordination with Caltrans to complete the construction on Phase 1 of the Interstate 80 State Route 65 interchange improvements, which look like they'll be finishing up towards the end of 2019, early 2020. On the project construction funding front, we're pursuing two efforts. We have first our continued efforts on the regional funding strategy, including polling and outreach. And second, we are pursuing State Senate Bill 1 funding by identifying multimodal projects of statewide significance as part of the Placer-Sacramento Corridor Mobility Plan. In addition to all these specific efforts, the work program includes focus on core agency activities, including the Transportation Development Act Administration, which you just heard, the unmet transit needs. We also have the Freeway Service Patrol, Airport Land Use Commission, and management of the South Placer Regional Transportation Authority and Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. For next fiscal year, our staffing levels are going to remain the same at 7 full-time equivalent staff. And then on the budget, it includes 24 different funding sources for a total of just under $5.6 million, and approximately 57% is funded through reimbursable work and grants. And as you'll see in the document, the budget does balance, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from board members? I see none. Anyone in the audience wish to address the board on this item? Seeing none. Looks like we're asked to authorize the executive director to submit the attached preliminary draft fiscal year 2019-20 overall work program and budget to Caltrans.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the item. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the item is moved. Thank you. Now we'll move to item J, presentation of Caltrans District 3 Regional Managed Lanes Feasibility Study.
I have this item also. So we're going to have a presentation here on the Caltrans District 3 Regional Managed Lane Feasibility Study. And I just want to give a little bit of background. A toll lane was looked at on Interstate 80 from I-5 in Sacramento County up to Highway 65 in Placer County back in 2010. And at that time, it was determined the revenues generated would not cover the cost to both construct and operate the facility. So Caltrans is taking more of a regional approach with this current feasibility study. And I want to let the board know that staff did submit comments on some of the preliminary results, requesting that both Interstate 80 and Highway 65 be considered as express toll lanes. And as you'll see in the presentation, Caltrans has incorporated those comments. And with that, I want to introduce David Van Dyken, who's the Caltrans project manager, and also Kwasi Akwambi, the project consultant with Kimberly Horn.
Good. Hello. Good morning, board. Excuse me. Before we get started, I just wanted to come up and introduce myself. Again, my name is David Van Dyken. I am the District 3 corridor manager, and I'm also the contract manager for the District 3 Managed Lanes Feasibility Study. We were asked here by Luke McNeil-Card, who also is on our TAC, to give you a presentation on the study and where we are now. With that, I would like to introduce Kwasi Akwambi from Kimberly Horn and Associates, and he will be running the presentation for you today.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's go ahead and get started. So as multiple people have mentioned, I'm here to talk about the District 3 Regional Managed Lanes feasibility study that we're working on with Caltrans. Just a quick overview on the presentation. I'm going to give some background on the project. I'm going to talk about what managed lanes are, go into kind of where we are currently on the project, and then discuss some of the analysis and the recommended projects that we've identified, and then we'll do a brief discussion on some next steps. So the background of this project, Caltrans has issued a deputy directive, DD 43R1, that requires each district to develop their own managed lanes system plan, an MLSP. There aren't a whole lot of restrictions or requirements on how that plan needs to look, but I mean, ultimately, basically what it is it's a map. It's a map that shows the locations of managed lanes facilities in each district over the next 20 years. And so as a result, for District 3, what they've asked us to do is several things, but kind of four key tasks. So one is identifying existing and planned managed lanes projects based on input from various stakeholders throughout the region. Another is to develop an evaluation and methodology process to identify managed lanes projects based on those existing and planned facilities in order to determine when those projects should be implemented. A fourth task will be to actually identify the locations and sort of the type of managed lane for each of those projects that have been identified based on a technical traffic analysis. And then doing what's called a toll revenue analysis. So based on the locations where we've identified toll lanes, and we'll talk again about various managed lanes approaches, but where we've identified toll lanes, coming up with some projections as to what the revenue generation is going to be for those lanes throughout the region. And then at the end, putting it all together and developing the MLSP map. So what are managed lanes? So there's various fancy definitions for managed lanes out there. If you Google managed lanes, you're going to find a whole host of different definitions. But frankly, what it boils down to is just any lane on a freeway facility that is, it actually doesn't even have to be on a freeway facility, but any lane that's controlled or that has specific restrictions. So a carpool lane counts as a managed lane. There are toll lanes, obviously, also that count as managed lanes, and reversible lanes, different things like that. But the idea is that they optimize efficiency. You're looking to basically take the roadway cross-section that you have and make it more efficient for the purpose of saving travel time reliability, saving drive time for folks who are using those facilities, just general efficiency. And so how do we manage those lanes? So there's different approaches. There's restricting the types of vehicles that can go on, vehicle eligibility. Either no trucks or certain trucks, no single occupant vehicles, or 2 people, 3 people, whatever it is. Pricing specific toll lanes, and then access control is another way to manage. And so what managed lanes include, kind of those last 3 bullets, as I mentioned, carpool lanes. Express lanes is another term that's used, and it's a term that we use in this particular report, but that just means it's restricted to either carpools, which are free, or vehicles that are single occupants. You can use the lane, but you need to basically pay a fee. Reversible lanes are another form of managed lanes, and what those are is you take certain lanes within a facility, and you say in the AM, these lanes are going southbound or northbound, whatever it is, and then in the PM, you take those same lanes and you switch them to go in the opposite direction. Basically, adds capacity in the peak direction. So again, here's a list of some of the different types of names that are used. So high occupancy vehicle lanes are carpool lanes. High occupancy toll lanes, hot lanes. Express lanes, express toll lanes, those are all more or less the same thing, value price lanes. And then we've also listed several sort of branded names that are used for these types of facilities in different parts of the country. Those of you who've been to the Bay Area may be familiar with Fast Track, or Southern California also. That's basically California's sort of managed lane or toll lane brand. Others, good to go lanes, sane lanes. You can see that the idea there is to convey some meaning of moving quickly, because that's the idea, that's the ultimate objective. So these are some examples of different types of access control. So least restrictive to the left, or most restrictive to the left, least restrictive to the right. So on the left, that's I-15 in San Diego. Those are reversible lanes in the middle, so they're barrier delineated. In the peak direction, you have traffic that's allowed to use those lanes. So in the AM, that facility is going southbound down towards downtown San Diego, and then in the PM, in the opposite direction, same set of lanes. In the middle, you've got what's called restricted access. So you can come in and out of the toll lanes in certain designated locations. The idea there is that it helps reduce the amount of friction between the general purpose lanes where everybody can drive and the managed lanes. And then on the right-hand side, you have what's called continuous access, which is just like going in and out of any other lane, as long as you're eligible to use it. Just a few more pictures of different flavors of managed lanes or express lanes. You can see also different types of physical delineations that are used and signage. So this is just a list of some of the best practices that we typically follow when moving forward to implement express lanes. Obviously, you want public outreach. You want to let folks know, especially folks who aren't familiar with those types of facilities, what they're all about. In the Bay Area, we've been deploying several of these over the last few years. I do this for a living, and it's still confusing to me a little bit. And so public outreach is pretty important, but it's, you know, even after that, it can still be a little bit tricky. So I want to talk about kind of exactly what we're doing right now and how it relates to areas that you all may be interested in. So, excuse me. As I mentioned, one of our tasks is to identify projects based on traffic analysis that we've done. So we are now in that process, right? So we've now done the traffic modeling and the traffic analysis. And I want to take a step back, actually, and mention that, again, this is a feasibility study. So this is, frankly, step one of a multi-step process. So the projects that we identify through this process aren't necessarily going to be the ones that are, you know, the only ones that are done, or that they'll be done at all, or that they're going to be done anytime soon. But the objective is really to just start taking a look at the possibility of deploying these types of facilities in the region. So we've gone through and done the traffic analysis, and we've started identifying specific projects. So the figure that you're looking at now is a side-by-side of our 2027 projection. So on the left-hand side, the blue lines that you see are in the model that was used to conduct the traffic analysis. We assumed, based on that first task of determining existing and planned managed lanes projects throughout the region, those are all locations where we anticipate carpool lanes in the year 2027 based on the research that we've done. And so that was sort of the baseline of the model. And so when we dropped that into the model and we said, okay, now what does traffic look like based on the fact that there's going to be carpool lanes in these areas? So that's where the red lines show up, and particularly here this is in the AM period, so this is from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. So assuming managed lanes along Highway 65 up to, I think that's 12 bridges there. So in the AM, we're anticipating congestion, or the model is showing some congestion that needs to be addressed from 12 bridges. I think it's down to Sunset. Yeah, I did write that down. And then also along I-80, heading down into the core, urban core of Sacramento. Now this is on the left-hand side. I've moved it over to the PM. So as you can see now, again, there's congestion on Highway 65, basically from I-80 all the way up to 12 Bridges. So we're anticipating congestion along Highway 85 in 2027, even with the addition of high occupancy vehicle lanes, carpool lanes. And so what we've done is we're recommending, on the right, we're recommending that, and yeah, it's hard to make out these colors, I realize, but we're recommending an express lane along Highway 65 on that stretch to tie into the express lane that will continue along I-80 down into Natomas. And then in 2036, this just shows kind of the expanded network. And so in 2036, we took a similar approach to what we did in 2027. We updated the model, extended the high occupancy vehicle lanes, the carpool lanes, and then looked at what happens with congestion at that point. And then we recommended some additional projects. And so this is our first pass. As Luke mentioned, we have gotten some comments from folks here at PCTPA, and we're collecting some additional comments from other stakeholders that are going to go into the next version of our report. And so after that's done, we will conduct a cost-benefit analysis. So we'll generate some estimated costs for the projects that we've recommended. We'll run them through the formal CalBCA model. And then based on the output, we will start prioritizing the projects throughout the region. And then we'll move forward to doing the toll revenue analysis and then finalizing the managed lane system plan. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from board members? Mr. Joyner? Down below. Yeah. On your right. It's a little button there.
All right, got it, thank you. First curiosity, you suggested that in the AM, the stretch between 12 Bridges and Sunset is congested?
Correct. Yeah.
I've seen very few signs of that. South of that is where we run into the major problems.
Okay.
So I'd be curious what data you're looking at that projects that.
So the baseline model data is based off of the SACOG MTP. So it's SACOG's traffic model for the region. However, it's a 2012 version of the model that was then extrapolated to 2017, which we then extrapolated to 2027. And so we are getting some feedback that congestion is showing up in certain areas that maybe is not reflective of what's happening today. And so we're certainly taking all of that feedback in and revisiting the model based on existing congestion. But again, the way that the model was developed is that it more or less took what was happening in 2012, added some other projects that SACOG has gotten from the region, and then it was manipulated and provided to us. So, yeah.
Okay, very good. I'll address that at SACOG then. And since you mentioned SACOG, I just want to compliment you. I've been on the SACOG board for at least 6 years. We've been discussing managed lanes and pricing for the last year or so. This has been the most useful presentation I've had on that topic in the entire time, so thank you.
Good job.
Happy to hear that.
Anyone else? Which one?
So I just had a question. I was wondering, when you guys refer to express lanes in this presentation, are you referring to toll only or combination toll and carpool?
Combination toll and carpool, yes.
Thank you.
So throughout our document, throughout this project process, that's how express lanes are defined. Yeah.
Mr. Guler?
Yeah, I'm curious, none of the maps that I saw that show projections going out as far as 2037, I believe, reflect the construction of a Placer Parkway connecting 65 to 99. Have you done any analysis to show what the construction of the parkway sooner rather than later might do to the need that you reflect on Interstate 80 and Highway 65 south of the Parkway connection?
No, no. So this, yeah, our analysis is based, again, just strictly on what was provided within the SACOG.
Quasi, maybe I can provide.
Sure.
So definitely Placer Parkway is assumed in the model. Of course, what Caltrans is looking at is just the state highway facilities, but it is assumed in the model that Placer Parkway would be constructed over to Watt Avenue and down to Baseline Road, but probably not all the way to Sutter County.
Over to Watt Avenue and down to Baseline, what does that mean?
A portion of Placer, in the portion of Placer County, it's assumed constructed over Placer Park would go over this, well,
Okay, and I guess the reason
timeline of the plan. Within the timeline of the plan, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess the reason that I'm asking the question is when we're looking at what are the costs associated with making these kinds of changes to the state highway and the federal interstate system, and what is the benefit that is achieved when we continue to show congestion even after those improvements along those routes, versus the benefit of paying attention to actually getting the parkway constructed between 65 and 99 and being able to bypass that stretch that of Interstate 80 and 65 south of Blue Oaks, which will continue to remain congested even after the improvements if the state and feds worked with us to actually construct that connection to allow much of the Lincoln and Rockland traffic off of the 80 corridor and 65 corridor and instead onto the Parkway and over to 99 to bypass that area. Are we evaluating return on investment on these potential expenditures looking forward?
I think the SACOG model actually looks at that there is a need for both managed lanes and Placer Parkway and the southeast connector as well as part of the overall model. So I think they estimate that all three are going to be needed eventually.
Okay, so even though Parkway is not reflected as a future project on this map going out to 2036, it is assumed in the impact that is resulting up there.
It is in the SACOG model, yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I should clarify, jumping in to answer that question early. The SACOG model includes several elements that are sort of outside the purview of this specific project, meaning that SACOG has obviously taken input from all of you folks as well as others and baked that into their model. And what they've done, what I'm saying is what they've done is they've more or less just handed us the model sort of as is, if you will, with the understanding that relevant projects have all been included. I'm just not aware of all of those relevant projects, and we haven't added all of those relevant projects. And one other thing that clarifies that this graphic is really just for information purposes. This is not the actual model. And so the actual model looks way more hideous than this. It's just a bunch of lines all over the place, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we just kind of put this together to provide a little bit more of a clear visual of what we're looking at.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? No? Does anyone in the audience wish to address the item on? Excuse me, yeah. Good morning.
Good morning. Mike Garabedian, Placer Group Sierra Club. I have a question for the Caltrans and your consultant.
Please address your comments to the.
Be happy to.
Yeah.
And that is what the public involvement is to respond to the current material before you, if that's available to the public, and then what the further public opportunity for comment and input is, and if there's going to be a copy of a draft or something like that. That's the kind of thing I'm curious about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would you be able to answer that comment for Mr.? Yeah. I mean, I know you're going to have more and more. This is just the first phase. There'll be plenty of opportunities for anybody to comment on this.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, this is an initial step in the process, and we're providing the documentation to all of the stakeholders as well as Caltrans. from this point forward, there will be several steps before projects are programmed and built. And so there will certainly be, as there are with many infrastructure projects, opportunities for public comment and
All right.
that type of thing. Yeah.
Very
But
good.
specifically, nothing's baked into this particular project.
Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else wish to address? Seeing none, this is an information item. Thank you very much for your presentation. Any comments from staff?
Just, Mr. Chair, just to add on to what Board Member Joyner had mentioned in terms of this being part of the SACOG MTP and our RTP process, this is one of the methods that SACOG is examining to meet the 19% state mandated greenhouse gas reduction process. And so we are engaged very closely with SACOG on looking at managed lanes and fast lanes and hot lanes and their feasibility as one of the many means that they're examining to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions and to meet the state's target.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Okay, now we'll move to item K, the Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Just very quickly, wanted to outline some of the things both coming up before the board in the next few meetings, and also talk a little bit about the funding strategy as well and an update on that. In terms of the next board meeting, next couple board meetings, we are going to have some discussion related to the Airport Land Use Commission, a couple of one major discussion, one potential item coming before you. At the March meeting, we will be receiving a presentation and conducting a consistency review of the DeWitt Center Master Plan, and so the county staff will be coming and making a presentation along with our staff on determining the consistency of that plan with the Auburn Airport Land Use Consistency Plan. And then on the, at least tentatively at this point, there is a potential for an appeal of a cell tower located near the Auburn Airport. There may be an appeal filed here shortly of staff's determination of consistency that may be coming before you at the April meeting. So just wanted to alert you to the fact that those items will be coming before you. And we have, at your request, formed a staff working group made up of our staff, county staff, and City of Auburn staff. We had our first meeting this week to talk about specifically the DeWitt Center Master Plan, but we plan to utilize that working group, if you will, to discuss issues before they come to you and hopefully resolve some of those issues before they come to you in a public setting. So that process, we think, will have significant advantages to the process. The next major item I wanted to talk about was the funding strategy, and as we had indicated to the board, we have successfully through San Diego Assembly Member Todd Gloria, he has submitted a bill, Assembly Bill 1413, to create the enabling legislation to allow a sub-county sales tax district statewide. So this bill, as we've discussed a number of times before your board, is the necessary component to allow a potential South County district that we're looking at as a potential funding source for the South County. In terms of a measure to fund transportation improvements in the county. And so that bill has been submitted by Todd Gloria. He was the same author that assisted us in 2017. And he's working closely with San Diego County, which is his home jurisdiction that needs this legislation, as well as along with 12 other counties. That this is important for them to achieve a self-help county status at some point in the future. So we have assembled previously a working group of the state lobbyists from the county and the city of Roseville and ourselves that are going to be working with Assemblyman Gloria's office to move this bill forward and to work with our coalition, again, of 12 other counties to enable this and to answer any questions that the various committees of the legislature have as this moves through first the Assembly and then the Senate and eventual consideration by the governor. So we're very happy to report to you that that bill has been submitted and is now going to be moving forward, along with about 2,200 other bills in the legislature. Also, in terms of the funding strategy, that is going to be coming back to you at the March meeting. We are going to be reporting to you the results of the polling that was just completed by FM3, the consultant that was hired by PCTPA to assess whether there's support for a South County potential measure, as well as an ability to guide us in terms of what our strategy should be. And so those results will be first discussed at a subcommittee level of the board, as we did with the formulation of that polling tool. And then will be brought to you on the March meeting, and we'll have likely a lengthy discussion of that item in March. With that, I conclude my executive director's report and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? No, I see none. And we'll now move to board direction to staff. Does board have any direction to staff that they haven't already received? Don't see any, okay. You have a list of informational items for your disposal, or whatever you want to do with them. And our next regularly scheduled PCTA board meeting is March 27th, 2019. And I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.